I was not supposed to be standing in the cold that morning, watching my mate hand my place at the ceremony to another woman. But there he was, Garrick, in his good grey cloak, the one I had mended at the hem twice, holding out the carved invitation token. My token. The one with my name burned into the back of it, and pressing it into Lady Vesna's gloved palm as if it had always been hers. He did not look at me. That was the part I kept turning over afterward, the way you worry a loose tooth. Not the betrayal. The economy of it. A man can hand away the rest of your life and not even spend a glance doing it. I was 22 years old. I had spent 6 of those years believing the mate bond meant something could not be undone. I stood at the bottom of the fortress steps with the wind off the mountain finding every gap in my own thin cloak, and I learned in the space of a breath that some things can be undone, very easily, if a man simply decides they are not worth the trouble of keeping. Vesna turned the token over. She read my name on the back of it. Then she smiled at me, the small, private smile of a woman who has gotten exactly what she came for. And she went up the steps on Garrick's arm toward the doors of the Great Hall, where the moon ceremony was about to begin without me. I had a choice in that moment. I want to be clear about that, because everything that came after turned on it. I could go home. There was a road behind me and a fire in my father's house at the end of it. And no one in that hall would have missed me. And I could have spent the rest of my life telling myself I had been spared something. Or I could go in. I went in. Not on anyone's arm, not with a token in my hand. I went up the steps alone, past the warriors at the doors who did not stop me, because no one had ever thought to make a rule against a woman simply walking into her own humiliation. And I found a seat in the very back row of the Great Hall, on the end, where the candlelight did not quite reach, and I sat down in it. I told myself I had come to watch. I told myself a great many things that morning. What I did not tell myself, what I did not let myself notice until much later, was that across the entire length of that hall, on a throne carved from black oak and old iron, the Alpha King had gone very still. I did not see it. I was looking at my own hands. But his wolf saw me. The moon ceremony is the oldest rite the pack keeps. Once a year, on the first full moon of spring, the unbonded come before the Alpha King, and the bond is honoured. Names spoken aloud, mates confirmed, the new pairings blessed before the whole of the court. It is meant to be the happiest morning of the year. For most of the women in that hall, it was. They wore flowers in their hair, and they sat near the front with their hands folded in their laps, glowing. I sat in the back and watched Lady Vesna take a seat in the second row beside Garrick, in the place that should have been mine. And I watched her arrange her skirts and tilt her head toward him and laugh at something he said. And I thought, with a calm that surprised me, so that is how it is done. I should explain about Garrick. We were not a love match. I want to be honest about that because it makes the rest of it stranger. His wolf had named me when I was 16, in the ordinary way, at a harvest gathering, and the village had treated it as settled from that day. I had grown into the idea slowly, the way you grow into a coat bought too large. He was not unkind. He was ambitious in a quiet, grasping way I had mistaken for steadiness. I had mended his cloaks and learned his mother's recipes, and waited for the spring I would turn 22, when pack law allowed a woman grown to stand for the ceremony. I had not known, until that morning on the steps, that ambition will let a man trade a fated bond for a noblewoman's dowry, the way another man trades a lame horse. The bond does not break cleanly when it is rejected. I knew that the way everyone knows a thing they have never felt, as a fact about other people. I was about to learn it the way you learn fire. Up at the front, the king's baiter began to read the names. I had stopped listening. I was counting the iron studs on the great doors, which is a thing I do when I do not want to be where I am, when the Beter's voice changed. A small hitch, a glance toward the throne, and I realized the hall had gone quiet in a way that quiet halls do not. The quiet of 300 people all looking in the same direction. They were looking at me. I followed the line of their attention back to its source, and at the end of it, on the black oak throne, the Alpha King was looking at me too. I had seen him before. Everyone in the territory had seen the Alpha King. Rurik, who had held the Iron Reach for 11 years and never once been challenged twice by the same wolf, because there was never a second time. He was the sort of man rooms rearranged themselves around. I had seen him at a distance, at the autumn judgings, the way you see weather. I had never been looked at by him. I would like to tell you I held his gaze with the composure of a woman who knew her own worth. What actually happened was that I looked back down at my hands, because being looked at like that by the most powerful wolf alive, in the back row of a hall where my mate had just given my place away, was more than I had the courage for in that particular minute. When I looked up again, he had risen from the throne. The Beter was saying something to him, low and urgent. The king was not listening to the Beter. He came down off the dais, 3 steps, unhurried, the whole hall parting before him like grass, and he started up the centre aisle, and I understood, with a cold drop in my stomach, that he was coming toward the back row. Toward me. I have replayed that walk many times. What I remember most is how wrong it was. The Alpha King does not leave his throne during the moon ceremony. He sits, he blesses, he does not move, and in 11 years he never had. The court had no procedure for it, and you could see them all groping for one. The Beter 2 steps behind with the name roll still open, Lady Vesna half risen with her smile gone uncertain. Garrick looking from the king to me and back with the dawning expression of a man who has realised he set down something valuable in the dark. The king stopped at the end of my row. Up close he was larger than weather. He smelled of pine and cold iron and wood smoke, and there was a line between his brows that I would later learn meant he was confused and would not admit it. And he looked at me, as if I were a word in a language he had spoken his whole life, and suddenly could not translate. He stopped at the end of my row. "You are sitting in the back." It was not what I expected. I had braced for many things. I had not braced for an observation about seating. "I am," I said. "Why?" Not a demand, something closer to genuine bewilderment, as if the arrangement of the room had personally failed to make sense to him, and he required me, specifically, to fix it. I considered the several true answers. My mate gave my place away. I have no token. I came to watch my own life happen to someone else. I chose the smallest one. It was the seat that was open. Something moved across his face. He looked at the seat. He looked at the front rows, full of flowers and folded hands. He looked back at the open seat beside me as if it had committed an offence. His gaze returned to the empty place. That is the wrong seat. And the king of the Iron Reach, in front of his entire court, with the names of the year's mates still unspoken in his beater's hands, sat down in the back row of his own great hall, in the wrong seat, beside a woman with no token and no place, and he did not appear to know why he had done it, any more than I did. The hall made a sound. Not a word, a sound, the collective intake of 300 people watching the order of the world tilt. I did not know what was happening. I want that on record. I sat there beside the most feared wolf alive, while he frowned at the middle distance, like a man who has walked into a room and forgotten his errand. And I thought, with the part of my mind that had not yet caught up to my situation. He has no idea why he is here either. That made two of us. If you have ever sat very still in a room while something rearranged itself around you that you did not ask for and could not name, stay with me. What happened next is the part I still cannot entirely explain, and I have had a long time to try. The moon and iron icon is where I keep the rest of these nights, if you want them. The beta cleared his throat. My king, the names. Rurik did not look at him. Read them. From the dais, my king, traditionally, read them from where you are standing. So the beta read the year's mate standing in the centre aisle, while the alpha king sat in the back row beside me, and I have it on good authority that no moon ceremony in the history of the pack has ever been conducted that way before or since. When the beta reached the pairing of Garrick and Lady Vesna, Rurik went still in a way I felt before I understood. He turned his head and looked at the token in Vesna's hand. My token, with my name on the back of it, that she had not thought to hide, and the line between his brows deepened. That token, he said, to no one, to the room. Whose name is on the back of it? The hall held its breath. Garrick stood. I will give him that much courage. Mine to give, my king, by arrangement. That is not what I asked. Vesna's hand closed around the token. Too late. Rurik had already crossed the distance. He did not seem to walk so much as simply be elsewhere, and he held out one open palm, and the most powerful wolf in the territory waited, with terrible patience, for a noblewoman to place a stolen invitation into his hand. She did. There was nothing else to do. He turned it over. He read my name on the back of it. And I watched the king of the Iron Reach do arithmetic in his head that he very plainly did not enjoy the answer to. Maron. He read it aloud, my name in his mouth. I had not told him my name. He looked at me. The whole hall looked at me. This is your token, he said. It was, I said, this morning. And it was given away. On the steps, just now. By him. A glance at Garrick that I would not have wished on a man I disliked, let alone one I had mended cloaks for. By him, I agreed. Rurik stood there holding my name in his hand, in front of 300 people, and for the length of several heartbeats he was completely, visibly at a loss. Not angry. Lost. A man who has found a thing he did not know he was looking for, in a place he did not know to look, being handed away by someone who did not know what they were holding. Then he did the second impossible thing of the morning. He gave the token back. To me. Pressed it into my hand and closed my own fingers over it, briefly, with a care that did not match anything else about him. And then he stepped back, as if he had surprised himself. It is yours, he told me. Keep it. And he returned to the throne, and the ceremony went on, and I sat in the back row with my own name in my fist, and absolutely no understanding of what had just been decided about my life, by a man who appeared to understand it even less than I did. I did not stay for the blessing. I slipped out the side door while the court was still murmuring, and I walked the cold road home, and I did not let myself cry until I was past the last houses, because I had learned long ago that a woman who weeps where she can be seen is a woman whose business becomes everyone's. The token sat in my pocket the whole way. I could feel the burned letters of my name against my fingers. I told myself it meant nothing. A king's whim, a correction of a discourtesy, the way he might write an overturned cup. I told myself that for 3 days. On the 4th day, the book started. I am a copyist. It is not a grand trade, but it is mine. A steady hand keeps me in bread and candles. My father's house has a small front room I use, with a window that gets the morning, and on the fourth morning after the ceremony, there was a book on the sill. It had not been there the night before. The window had been latched. It was latched still. It was a book of northern tales, the kind told around fires. Wolves and ice and old bargains, bound in plain leather, well read, with a particular page marked by a ribbon. The marked tale was about a king who could not say a true thing aloud, and so left it written instead, in books, for the one person he hoped would read carefully enough to find it. There was no note. There was no name. I told myself the priest had left it. The priest had been dead 2 years, I knew that. I told myself anyway, because the other explanation was not one I was prepared to hold. The next week there were 2 books, the week after a 3rd, and a 4th. And by the end of the month, my windowsill had become a small library that arrived through a latched window. Each one marks at a particular tale. Each tale circling the same quiet shape. Recognition. The thing seen before it can be said. The word a proud man cannot speak and so writes. I am not a fool. I knew, by the 2nd week, who was leaving them. There is only one person in the iron reach who can come and go through a latched window without waking a household, and he does not do it for copyists. What I did not know, what kept me awake, was why. I want to tell you about the 3rd thing, because it is the one that broke me open. 6 weeks after the ceremony, the noble houses held the spring judging at the fortress, where matters of pack law are settled in open court, and a copyist of good hand is sometimes called to record the rulings. I was called. I did not let myself think about why a village copyist had been called to the king's own hall when the fortress had 3 scribes of its own. I went, and I sat at a small table to the side, with my ink and my register, and I kept my eyes on my page, and I copied. Garrick bought a suit that morning. I had not expected to see him. He stood before the king and he argued, with the grasping confidence of a man who believes the law is a tool and not a wall, that the mate bond between us had been lawfully dissolved by his free transfer of the token, and that he should bear no penalty, and that I should be barred from claiming any tie to him going forward. He was, I realised as he spoke, frightened. Not of me, of what the king's behaviour at the ceremony had begun to mean for him. Rurik listened to the whole of it from the throne, with the stillness I now knew meant he was holding something down. When Garrick finished, the king was quiet for a long moment. A bond is not a token, he said at last. The token is paper. The bond is the thing the paper records. You cannot dissolve a debt by handing away the ledger. He leaned forward. But you have raised the question yourself, so the court will answer it. Is the bond between you and the copyist Marin dissolved? It is, my king, by my free act. Then you reject her. Rurik's voice did not rise. That was the worst of it. Say it plainly, in open court, so it is recorded. You reject the bond your wolf named. I had stopped writing. I did not remember stopping. Garrick looked at me, the first time he had looked at me since the steps, and I saw him weigh it, and I saw him decide, and he turned back to the king, and he said it. I reject her. The bond does not break cleanly when it is rejected. I told you I would learn that the way you learn fire. I learned it then. It went through me like cold driven into the marrow, like a hand closing around my breath and refusing to let it go. The room tilted. My pen rolled off the table. Somewhere very far away, I heard the ink jar break. The rejection of a fated bond is a wound the body takes whether the heart wanted the bond or not. And my body took it, folding me forward over the little table, the cold racing out from my sternum into my hands, my vision going white at the edges. I did not cry out. I want that on record too. I gripped the edge of the table until the wood bit into my palm, and I held myself in the chair, and I did not give that room the sound it was waiting for. And then there was warmth. Not a touch. He did not touch me. It came through the air of the room, the way heat comes off a hearth you have walked near in winter. A steadying warmth that found the cold in me and pushed back against it, and under it, beneath my own ragged breathing, something that was not quite a voice, a presence, a wordless insistence, fierce and certain, that said, without words, in a register beneath language, not lost. Mine. Here, his wolf. Reaching across a room he had not crossed, to hold the breaking in me back from the edge. I got my breath. The white receded. I sat up. The king was on his feet at the dais, one hand braced on the arm of the throne, his knuckles white, his whole body angled toward me like a drawn thing. And on his face, naked, undefended, in front of his entire court, was an expression I had no business seeing on the most feared wolf alive. He had felt it. The breaking of my bond to another man had gone through him. The court saw it. Lady Vesna, at the side of the hall, saw it, and I understood, sitting there with my pen on the floor and my palm bleeding where the table had bitten it, the thing that the books had been circling for 6 weeks and could not say. His wolf had named me. At the ceremony, in the back row, in the wrong seat, the most powerful man in the territory had been fated to a copyist with no token, and he had been leaving books on her windowsill for 6 weeks because he did not have the first idea how to say so out loud. The oblivious king, the court would call him later, when it became safe to make small jokes about it. The wolf knew. He was the last to find out. I did not feel chosen. I want to be honest about the texture of it. I felt cracked open in a public room, in front of the man who had rejected me and the woman who had taken my place. And I felt the warmth of a wolf that was not mine to want, holding me upright. And over all of it, I felt furious. At Garrick, at the room, and yes, at the king. For the unbearable presumption of a man who would leave a woman books for 6 weeks and let her find out what they meant like this. I stood. My legs held, barely. I retrieved my pen from the floor. I set my broken ink jar upright, though there was nothing left in it to save. The ruling, I said to the king, in a voice that came out steadier than I felt, should be recorded, if the court still requires a copyist. I lifted my bleeding hand a little. Mine is unsteady at present. It was the closest I could come, in that room, to telling the Alpha King exactly what I thought of how this morning had gone. He understood me. I saw it land. The line between his brows again, but underneath it now, something that might have been the beginning of shame, in a man who I would later learn had not felt the need for it in 11 years. Court is adjourned, he said, without looking away from me. The ruling stands. The bond is dissolved. A pause. The penalty against the copyist standing is denied. She keeps her rank, her trade, and her name. And then, more quietly, only to me, in a voice the court strained to hear and could not. I owe you an explanation I do not know how to give. I am aware that this is my failing and not yours. I left him standing there with it. I did not run this time. I walked out of the King's Hall with my ink-stained register under my arm and my chin level, past Vesna's white face and Garrick's lowered eyes, and I did not stop until I was on the cold road again. And even then, I did not weep, because something in me had changed in that room, and I did not yet have a name for it. Here is what changed. I will tell it plainly, because the books had taught me that the plain thing is the true one. I had spent 6 years believing my worth was settled. A copyist, a mended cloak wife, a token with a name on the back that could be handed away on a cold morning by a man who did not look at me. And in the king's hall, doing arithmetic he did not enjoy, a wolf had looked at me and found a different sum. I was not grateful. Gratitude was what Vesna had wanted me to feel, the small, grasping gratitude of a woman lucky to be noticed. I felt no gratitude. But I was, for the first time in 6 years, curious about my own worth. That is a more dangerous thing to give a woman than flowers. The books kept coming. I stopped telling myself the priest had left them. I wrote back. It started small. I left one of his books on the sill with a single line copied onto a slip of paper and tucked inside it, at the marked tail. A line of my own in my steady copyist's hand. A man who can only speak in other men's stories should be careful which ones he marks. It was gone by morning. In its place, a new book, and inside it, in a hand I had never seen but knew at once, heavy, blunt, a warrior's letters, pressed hard into the page as if writing cost him something, a single line. I have never been good at the other kind of speaking. I am told it is a failing. I am trying to learn it, badly. I read it standing at my window in the grey morning, and I laughed out loud in my empty front room. A startled, ungraceful laugh, the first real one in months, because the most feared wolf in the iron reach had just confessed, on paper, through a latched window, that he was bad at feelings, and was working on it, badly. And somehow that undid more of my anger than any grand declaration could have. So we wrote. For a month we never spoke aloud. He could have summoned me. He was the king, he could have done anything. Instead, he left books, and I left lines, and through that strange, slow correspondence, I came to know a man the court did not. I learned he had stood at his own window the night of the ceremony and not slept. That the wrong seat, the one he had crossed his whole hall to sit beside, had been, in his words, the only seat in the room he had ever wanted to sit in. That I had been wrong about him. I had thought him presumptuous, and he was not presumptuous. He was terrified, in the specific way of a man who has never encountered a thing he could not afford to lose. I did not know yet that Lady Vesna had not finished. She came to my father's house herself, on a grey afternoon near the end of that month, which should have warned me. Noblewomen do not call on copyists. She came with 2 of her houseguard and a parchment and a smile I remembered from the fortress steps. And she sat in my own front room, among the king's books, and she explained my situation to me as though I might have failed to understand it.
"He will tire of it," she said. "Men like him always do. The novelty of a woman who writes him clever lines. It will last a season." She set the parchment on my copying table. "This is a transfer of trade. Sign it and you will be settled 3 valleys west, with enough silver to keep you in candles for 10 years. And you will be gone before he tires of you, and the tiring becomes the kind of thing that ends a woman's standing entirely. I am offering you a dignified exit. There will not be a second offer." I looked at the parchment. I looked at her guard by my door, and I understood that this was not an offer. It was the first move of a woman who had felt the hall tilt away from her, and meant to tilt it back. "You arranged the token," I said. It was not a question. I had had a month to think. "On the steps. You did not happen to be there. You arranged for Garrick to give my place away where I would see it. You wanted me humiliated out of that hall before the names were read."
Her smile did not change. That was answer enough. "Sign the parchment," she said. "No," I said. "Then you should understand what refusing it costs." She rose, smoothing her skirts. 3 rival houses would pay a great deal to know the Alpha King has been made foolish by a village copyist. That he left his throne, that he sits at windows, that he writes. A king who can be made foolish can be made weak. A king made weak does not keep his territory long. She paused at my door. "I am not threatening you. I am explaining a danger to a man you have grown fond of. The kindest thing you could do for him is be 3 valleys away before his enemies learn what you have made of him." And there it was, the trap with teeth. Not aimed at me, aimed at him, through me. She had found the one argument that could move a woman who could not be bought or frightened. The suggestion that loving him was the thing that would destroy him. She left. I sat among his books for a long time. I did not sign the parchment. But I did not sleep either. Because she had put her finger on the one fear I had not let myself name. That I was a danger to him. That a king fated to a copyist was a king with a soft place his enemies would dig their thumbs into. And that the warmth I had felt across that hall might be the very thing that got him killed. I made a decision. It was the wrong one. I want to say that clearly, so you do not think the heroine of this story was always wise. I decided to refuse him, to protect him, to be, for once, the one who handed something away on a cold morning. Only this time, I would be giving away my own place. And I would tell myself it was love. I went to the fortress that night. I did not go through a window. I did not have his gifts. I went to the gate and gave my name and was brought, with a speed that told me I had been expected at that gate every night for a month, to the king's library. He was there. Of course he was there. Among more books than I had known existed, in shirt sleeves, with ink on the side of his hand, and when he saw me in the doorway, he stood so fast he knocked his chair back, and the line between his brows vanished entirely, and for one unguarded moment, the most feared wolf in the iron reach looked, simply, helplessly, glad. It made what I had come to do much harder. Marin. My name in his mouth still undid something in me. "I came to tell you to stop," I said. "The books, all of it. I came to refuse you, before you ruin yourself over a copyist." The words I had rehearsed on the road. Lady Vesna is right. A king fated to a woman with no house and no name is a king with a weakness his enemies will use. I will not be the soft place they dig into. I am going west. I came to say it to your face, because you said the speaking aloud kind was a failing, and I will not have you learn it badly from a letter I leave on a sill. He was quiet. He did not close the distance, and I would understand later that he stopped because he had learned, somewhere in that month of letters, that I needed the choosing left to me. He came around the desk and stopped 3 paces away. "Is that what you want?" "West, 3 valleys, candles for 10 years. "It is what is wise." "That is not what I asked you." The same words from the judging hall, turned now to a different use. I have spent 11 years doing the wise thing. The wise thing is a cold bed and a long rain and a kingdom that fears me. I was very good at it. He looked at me with that terrible directness. I do not want to be good at it anymore. I want the wrong seat. I have wanted exactly one thing in 11 years, and it is sitting in my library, telling me to send it away for my own good. A breath. "You are not the soft place my enemies will dig into, Marin."
You are the first thing in 11 years I have been willing to fight for. Those are not the same. A man with nothing to lose is not strong. He is only alone. I have been confusing the two my whole life. I had a great many wise things prepared to say. I said none of them. I stood in the king's library with my refusal turning to ash in my mouth, and I understood that I had come to hand away my own place, and that I, like Garrick on the steps, had nearly thrown away the one thing worth keeping because I had mistaken fear for sense. She will use it against you, I said. It was the last of my resistance, and we both knew it. The houses, that you can be made foolish. Then let them learn what I have learned. There was no heat in it, with the certainty of a man who has finally found solid ground. That a king who can be made foolish by the right woman is not weak. He is, for the first time, defended by something stronger than fear. The corner of his mouth moved. Also, I intend to make Lady Vesna's role in arranging a fraudulent token at a sacred ceremony a matter of open record at the next judging. She has rather overplayed her hand. Forging a moon ceremony token is not a small crime. She has given me the rope herself. I laughed. I could not help it. The oblivious king, who had not known why he crossed his own hall, had apparently understood Vesna's scheme down to the ground, while I had spent a sleepless night frightening myself with it. You knew, I said. I am slow about my own feelings. I am not slow about my court. There was a silence then, of the kind the books had taught me to read. The space between us was 3 paces, and it had a weight I could have set down by crossing it. He would not cross it. He had decided that somewhere, and held to it, and waited. So I crossed it. I will not describe the kiss, except to tell you what broke open in me when it came. The 6 years of believing my worth was settled, cracking like ice off a thawing river, and underneath it, something I had not let myself feel since I was a girl. The simple, astonishing relief of being seen all the way down and not handed away. That was the whole of it. A door I had not known was shut, opening. I was not breathless. I was, for the first time in a very long while, exactly where I had chosen to be. When I stepped back, the most feared wolf in the iron reach looked thoroughly undone, and I found that I did not mind being the cause of it at all. You knocked your chair over, I told him. I am aware, he allowed, with great dignity, and did not pick it up. The judging, where Lady Vesna's scheme came undone, was held 2 weeks later, and I recorded it myself, with a steady hand and considerable satisfaction. She had, as the king said, overplayed. Forging a name onto a moon ceremony token to defraud a woman of her place at the right was a crime against the old law itself, witnessed now by 300 people who had seen the king read my name off the back of it. Garrick, offered the choice between Vesna's protection and his own neck, discovered the limits of his loyalty with impressive speed. He named her the architect of the whole arrangement. From the steps to the parchment in my front room, Vesna was stripped of her house standing, her lands placed under the king's stewardship and exiled past the western border. 3 valleys west, as it happened, which I confess gave me a small, uncharitable pleasure to record in my own steady hand. Garrick kept his neck and lost everything else that had ever mattered to him, which is its own kind of sentence. The last I saw of him, he was a ranked warrior no longer ranked, mending his own cloaks. I did not gloat. I had mended enough cloaks to know it is honest work and a hard lesson, and I was, by then, far too happy to spare him much thought at all. As for the king made foolish by a copyist,
The rival houses did learn of it, exactly as Vesna had promised. They learned that the Alpha King of the Iron Reach had left his throne, sat in the wrong seat, and courted a village woman through a latched window with books and badly written confessions. And then they learned the rest of it. But the same king had felt the breaking of her old bond across a crowded hall and held her upright with his wolf alone. That a man defended by something he was willing to fight for is not a man with a weakness. He is a man who has, at last, something to be strong for. No house challenged him that year, or the next. It turns out a kingdom would rather follow a king who can be made foolish by love than one who can only be made cold by its absence. Who knew? We were bonded at the next moon ceremony, a year to the day after the first. I did not sit in the back row. But I will tell you a thing he did, that I have never told anyone, because it is mine. When the hall was full and the court was assembled and the names were waiting to be read, the King of the Iron Reach came down off his dais, unhurried, the whole hall parting before him like grass, exactly as he had a year before. And he walked to the very back row, to the wrong seat, the one on the end where the candlelight does not quite reach. And he sat down in it, alone, for just a moment. Then he stood and crossed the whole length of his hall to where I waited at the front in flowers I had not thought I would ever wear. And he offered me his hand, and this time I took it. And we walked up the aisle together, while 300 people who had once watched the order of the world tilt, watched it, finally, set right. Why the back seat? I asked him later, when we were alone. A year on, why go and sit in it again? He considered the question, with the seriousness he gave to all my questions, which is one of the many things I had not expected to love about him. Because a year ago, he said, the only seat in that room I wanted was the one no one else would take. I wanted to sit in it once more while it was still empty. The line between his brows, briefly, and then gone. So that I would remember the morning I did not know what I was doing, and be grateful I did it anyway. I keep the token still, the one with my name burned into the back of it, the one that was handed away on a cold morning by a man who did not look at me, and handed back an hour later by one who could not look away. It sits in a carved box on the mantel of a room with a window that no longer needs to be unlatched, because the man who used to come through it now simply lives here, and is still, I am pleased to report, terrible at speaking his feelings aloud, and still trying, and still, on the rare occasions he manages it, worth every book it took to get there. I was not supposed to be standing in the cold that morning, watching my mate hand my place away. I have never been so glad to have been somewhere I did not belong. So tell me, did you see it coming, the morning I walked into that hall alone? Or did you, like me, think you already knew how the story ended? Leave me a note below and tell me where you are listening from tonight, and if you want the rest of these nights, the other kings, the other women, the other wrong seats that turned out to be the only right ones. The moon and iron icon is where I keep them. Stay warm. I will keep a seat for you.